Alex Hall, and this is Disorder, the podcast where we try to make sense of our mad world. And today we are talking about the mad state of mad American politics, and using as our kickoff point the recent vice presidential debate between Democrat Governor of Minnesota Tim Walz, who is Kamala Harris's running mate, versus J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, who believes that Haitian immigrants are eating your cats and dogs, and is Donald Trump's running mate. So we are 5 weeks out from the US presidential election, possibly the most consequential, certainly of my lifetime, perhaps of many people's lifetimes. And the longest living US president, Jimmy Carter, who celebrated his 100th birthday this week, is apparently clinging on to life because he wants to vote in this most consequential of elections. So good luck to you, Sir President Jimmy Carter. And to help me navigate the last few stages of the US presidential race, I am delighted to be joined by Greg Olear, a very accomplished writer and columnist who also is host of his own podcast, Prevail. There is also a Substack, Prevail, and who also runs his own YouTube show, which goes out every Friday night and is great to watch, known as 5-8. So thank you, Greg, for joining me on today's show. All a bit bleary-eyed after watching the debate last night.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm a fan of the show, as you know, and I appreciate you asking me on.
So let's kick off with last night's debate then. Who do you think won?
I tend not to look at these things in terms of winners and losers because
it's such a shallow question,
yeah,
right?
I think, no, it's not a bad question, but it's a good question because it helps. You know, part of the problem that we're having right now, here's what I'm doing what J.D. Vance did in the debate last night. I'm not answering your question directly.
You're deflecting. Very good.
Part of the problem, you're a diplomat, you know how the problem.
How dare you insult diplomacy? We are nothing but full of integrity and honesty, and we answer questions directly all the time.
All the time. Part of the problem I think that we're having in the United States right now is that the media is covering this in the way that the media always covers elections, which is there's winners and losers, there's the poll numbers, there's the horse race, and it's like covering a football game or something where it's like, how are the Ravens doing? Well, they were bad in the first quarter, but then Derrick Henry picked up speed as the game went along, et cetera, et cetera. And that's not the way that you should cover an election ever, but certainly not this year when one of the candidates is just a fascist who's going to end democracy in the United States and who tried to overthrow the government last time he was in office, and also, by the way, killed over 500,000 people due to his gross mishandling of the COVID, response, which no one seems to remember or want to talk about. But in terms of winners and losers, I watch these things with the idea of, okay, if I've never seen these people before, which most people watching this have not, what would I think? And I think Vance, I thought, was impressive. I think he came out and he's smart. Certainly he's competent. Certainly he is young. And I think Walz, his personality shone through. Walz is clearly a nice guy. He's a decent human and he cares a lot and he's good at governing and knows what he's talking about. And I think all of these things sort of shone through. But I was thinking about this. I remember when I was in high school, and we did some sort of debate thing, I think around a presidential election. And I got assigned to do, I think it was the H.W. Bush versus Dukakis election. So I got assigned to do H.W. Bush's spin, I guess, in this debate that we were having in class. And I didn't really agree with anything, but sometimes when you don't agree, it's easier to debate because you're just making shit up. And I think that's what Vance, we saw that last night. Vance, if this was a debate class, Vance would get an A. because he took all the talking points, all the stuff, he deflected where he needed to deflect, he answered where he needed to answer, and he kept saying, we need to do a better job of that. And then he would move on. But like, you can do a better job of it right now, JD. You're in the frickin' Senate, and the reason we have gun violence is literally because of you. Not because of Trump, because of you, a Republican senator, refuses to vote on this stuff and give us sane gun reform. So I thought that was a clever rhetorical tactic. We need to come together and we need to do a better job on that. That answer is fine in a debate class. It doesn't work. It's not effective when the topic is, should we allow women to bleed to death because they can't have abortions? Well, we have to do a better job on this. No, JD, you want to ban this on a federal level. You've said it many times. Project 2025, whose head you wrote the foreword of the book to, is all about this. They want to ban abortion. They want to ban contraception. They want to criminalize LGBTQ people and take away marriage equality and all this other stuff. So, for him to go out there and speak this way, it's snake oil in a sense, but I think it also speaks to, we're not used to seeing this. Other than maybe the Kamala-Mike Pence debate, which I don't remember anything about other than a fly landed on his head, we haven't had a debate in this country in a while that's just two competent people arguing about things. We've had Donald Trump gish-galloping and spewing bullshit for a while. I mean, it's been some time. And I think last night was, my son was watching, and I was like, this is what debates used to be. Two people, you don't agree with one, but they're civil, they're nice to each other, they're polite, and all this kind of stuff. And I think the real loser in the debate was Donald Trump, because he, compared to JD, looks like an out-of-touch, old, bumbling idiot.
I mean, I went to a debate watch party, which was great because there was a lot of atmosphere there. It was organized by a Democrat canvasser, so everybody in the room was predisposed to be sympathetic to Walz and critical of J.D. Vance. I would say the mood in that room sort of ranged from sort of outrage to what I felt was sort of pretty impressed by J.D. Vance and also outraged by him. And for listeners who didn't actually watch the debate, which obviously was taking place in the early hours in the UK. So for British listeners who may not have been glued to the TV like you and I were, I mean, what I took away from the debate was that JD came in with a very clear strategy, which was to wrong foot all his opponents and critics and Tim Walz by out-nicing Tim Walz.
Yes.
So in the run-up to the debate, there had been these leaks that he was going to lambast traitor Tim for lying about his national service, and he was going to be the attack dog for Donald Trump. And what he actually did was came on the stage and shook hands with Tim Walz and kept on referring to Tim and saying, actually, I think Tim and we agree on quite a lot of this stuff. And I respect what you say about that. And he just tried to out-nice Tim Walz. And Tim Walz's brand is the folksy, Midwestern, nice dad, male role model, teacher, all-round good guy. And J.D. Vance came in with a very deliberate strategy to be nice and not weird. So I thought that was very smart. But then the sort of outrage was he just delivered absolute whoppers throughout the debate. And as we went through all the list of issues, economy, immigration, abortion, foreign policy, he portrayed this narrative that things were all calmer under Trump.
Yeah.
That the economy was better, that the world wasn't on fire, that immigration was more under control. And then he said everything has got worse since then. And Kamala let all these immigrants in. The world is on fire. There's war in the Middle East. The economy is struggling. And the one thing that President Biden did was actually keep some of the tariffs that Trump introduced. He claimed that Donald Trump had tried to preserve Obamacare. And Tim Walz actually did call him out on this and said, that's just completely wrong. You tried to repeal it in the Senate, and it was only John McCain's vote that saved Obamacare. But I thought Vance had a good night. And I think your setting that if you were only watching it at that moment and you hadn't been following the rest of the presidential election, Vance came across as more polished, more at ease, more confident, and very disciplined in his messaging.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is Walz's métier necessarily. I think, he's not that kind of guy. He has this sort of resting, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that face. Like he's almost hangdog looking at Vance lie all the time. But the end of the debate, when Walz asked him point blank, did Donald Trump lose the election? And Vance refused to answer. That's the only thing that anybody will be talking about from the debate. It brings to the fore the problems with this guy, with Trump and the whole thing. Like, I write about this in my book, which is Trump was a really bad president. And there seems to be this revisionist history, certainly in MAGA land, where he's like, 4 years ago, we were better off. And it's like, no, 4 years ago, we were hoarding toilet paper. That's jokey. But the reality is that Trump and Kushner, who was in charge of the shadow team, and Pence, who was in charge of the White House response to COVID, politicized it from an early on. They did not try to help people. They tried to use it for their own political benefit, and they set the states up against each other, vying against each other for supplies, critical supplies that the states needed, which is what the federal government is supposed to do. There have been studies that show people were going to die of the pandemic no matter what. That was a given. It's a pandemic. It's a plague, right? But if the U.S. response to it had been on par with South Korea or Germany or, oh my God, New Zealand would have been amazing. The study that I cite in my book, which is from UConn, says that 300,000 more Americans would still be alive. And I've read studies since I wrote my book in May, which says actually the number is higher than that. There's 600,000 Americans would be alive if Trump wasn't completely incompetent and had politicized all this stuff. That's how many people died in the Civil War. Trump killed as many people as like Robert E. Lee and the Confederacy did, but we're expected to believe that everything is just sort of okay. It's not okay. And then the one thing that I don't think he can lie about as easily is J6. I mean, that was a real thing. We all watched it unfold. We watched it on TV. We've seen clips of it. It wasn't tourists. It wasn't fine, good people on both sides. It was a mob of besiegers sent there by Trump to overthrow the government. That's what happened on J6. And Walz, again, he had a great line because Vance was trying to blame Facebook or something, Facebook ads. And Walz said, January 6th wasn't Facebook ads. And I thought that was a really good line.
Yeah, so I definitely think the standout moment for Walz was exactly this point that you mentioned, and for me was the standout moment of the debate overall. And again, just for our British listeners who may not have followed the debate, unfortunately, it was the very last question. So a lot of people may have tuned out and gone to bed by then. But the questioners say, now we're going to turn to democracy. And Senator Vance, your candidate, has, argued that 2020 election was stolen. So they were talking about election integrity. And Tim Walz makes this fantastic point. He looks at the camera and he says, America, this is what it's really about. Donald Trump is still denying that the election was lost in 2020. And then he turned and looked at J.D. Vance and said, do you believe that Donald Trump lost the election? And J.D. Vance says, I'm looking to the future. And if we're going to talk about integrity of our democracy, the Democrats are trying to censor everything. And that's where we got to Facebook, that the Democrats are trying to censor Facebook and what people can say on social media. And Walz, this was the only time he came back really strongly. He said, it's because Mike Pence certified the election in 2020 that he's not on the debate stage with me now, i.e. he's no longer Trump's running mate, because he actually stood up to Donald Trump. Who is going to be the guardrail in a second Trump presidency if you are just going to go along with everything Trump does? So I thought that was just absolutely the standout moment. And as you said, looking at the debate as a whole on immigration, on economy, on abortion, J.D. Vance tried to moderate the Republican stance on a lot of issues. He tried to gloss over a lot of Trump's record and attack Kamala. This was the one point where it was clear they were completely different. And again, Tim Walz, to his credit, said, I've enjoyed this debate. We found a lot of synergy here. But on this issue, we are miles apart. So I thought that was Walz's definitely his strongest moment.
And I think that's what people are going to see on social media, on clips and stuff like that. But let's talk about Vance for 1 second, if we may, because...
No, let's continue with Vance.
Yeah, I mean, Vance is a more critical vice presidential figure than Walz would be, okay? Because Trump is almost 80. I don't know if listeners have seen clips of him at rallies lately, but he looks like a cat that's going to get taken to the vet and put asleep the next day. Like, he's really not good. And I hate the guy, but even by just objectively, he's failing right now. So J.D. Vance is a fascist, okay? I know whatever he presented last night, his real roots of his belief system is that he does not believe in democracy. He's part of this, what they call the Dark Enlightenment or the New Right movement, which is kind of funded by Peter Thiel, who's this like German-born via South African billionaire. He sort of hovers like Sauron on, and funds all these horrible people. And they don't want democracy. They want a dictatorship. And they've talked openly about having a Red Caesar and all this kind of stuff. The real problem here is that J.D. Vance, he's in with the Project 2025 people. Project 2025 is a horrifying document to anybody in the country who is a woman or gay or trans, or likes to have protected sex with people or enjoys health care. Like, it's a horrifying document that will help basically only uber religious weirdos and the libertarian rich guys like Peter Thiel. Donald Trump is old. If he gets elected, J.D. Vance is almost certainly going to be president. And if J.D. Vance is president, J.D. Vance is not going to go away. And I think people need to understand that. The media is not going to report on that because it's too speculative, I guess. But if you go back and look at the things that Vance has said and the core of his belief system, he's in with Leonard Leo, who's this, the Federalist Society guy that has Opus Dei ties, that runs the Supreme Court. He's in with the Teneo Network, which is Leo and these guys' movement to take over the education system and the entertainment system and sort of push these far-right, unpopular views. And the reason they need to set up a dictatorship is because the way that they want the country to be is unpopular. They have unpopular opinions about things. Most people want women to be able to have abortions when they're dying. Most people want, sane gun regulations. If Trump gets in, he's either going to be 25th or something's going to happen and Vance is going to be president fairly early on. I think that's their plan. And that is not something that anyone is going to like. The guy's 40 years old. He could be like Franco and be around for the next 45 years or something. And it's not what we want in the country. And I can't express loudly enough the danger that this poses, not just to the United States and our democracy, but to NATO, to the Western world, to all of the good guys. He is a bad guy. These are bad guys, and they're trying to infiltrate the government. I can't say it any more plainly than that.
I have a question for you, though. As was noted in the debate last night by one of the interviewers, 4 years ago, J.D. Vance was a huge critic of Donald Trump, describing him as a mini Hitler and unfit for office and whose economic plans were bonkers. So if J.D. Vance is now the secret spearhead of this more sinister agenda, is that because he actually believes it? And he's always been that way? Or is he just a power-hungry individual who've seen that this is the way to get power?
It's about power. These people, and by these people, I mean the Dark Enlightenment, the New Right, the grouping, the coalition of far-right extremist Catholic weirdos, as opposed to mainline Catholics, which I grew up that way, so I'm allowed to say that. But there's this faction of extremist Catholics led by Leonard Leo, certain very right-wing evangelicals, libertarian billionaires. They see Trump as a tool to get power and nothing more. They don't believe in him. They don't like him. He's basically a Trojan horse that they're going to ride in and get into power. Now, another Dark Enlightenment thing is, you remember the Unabomber?
Yeah.
Right? He wrote this manifesto back in the early 90s, which is a very influential document among the Dark Enlightenment and these new right people, of which J.D. Vance is a member. He's in with this group, okay? And what the Unabomber says is that he wants a revolution and he wants to just destroy everything. And he makes this point very clearly in the manifesto that when revolutions happen in countries and in states, okay, there's two things that they're trying to do. They're trying to, first of all, overthrow the existing government, and second of all, establish whatever utopia they want, whether it's, a communist paradise or whatever. And the second part, the idealistic part that they want to set up, that almost never happens. But what always happens is that the existing government falls. And his point in that is that the government is so bad, everything is so screwy that we just have to destroy everything and start from scratch. That's when people say they're black-pilled. That's what that means. It means they think that the whole system is rotten and it just needs to be destroyed. One of the things that they're going to do, this did not come up in the debate last night, is that they're going to fire 50,000 civil servants, and they've already set up the architecture to be able to do this very quickly in the federal government. They're going to take a battle axe to the federal government and gut it. And there's this whole animus towards bureaucracy. And I get it, regulations, bureaucracy, government this. But the government is all of us. That's what the government of the United States is. Regulations are important. Trump got rid of the regulations on food inspections, and now we have the boar's head thing where people die from poisoned meat products, right? Cold cuts that went bad because there's no more regulation on that. That's a thing that Trump did. That's more people that Trump killed, by the way, because of his policies. So you have these regulations and these people that work in the federal government that are doing good things, like sending out Social Security checks on time and making sure that our troops have logistics and, making sure that the education system is good and not just a privatized thing where people are just ramming weird religious U.S. madrasas kind of education down people's throats. And they're going to get rid of all that. And people are they might like it in concept because Ronald Reagan told them that the government's bad. But if you are in Asheville, North Carolina right now, waiting for relief from FEMA, and in a post-Trump second term, that's going to get cut. There's not going to be this protection. You're just screwed if you're in that position. So it might sound good on paper, but it is not a good thing. It's a terrifying thing.
But going back to this issue of J.D. Vance, if he's just doing it in order to get into power, but he doesn't actually believe in any of it, could he be different once he was in power? Or will the sort of forces still impel him down this direction? Because that seems to be a winning ticket. Deport all the immigrants back to a sort of family life. So they're sort of propelling this sort of agenda. But how would it actually play out? I mean, can he get away with that? Will Congress vote all those things through? Is this just sort of a narrative, and then when they're in office, they can't actually deliver on this? I mean, you say they're sort of going to run a dictatorship, but how would it actually happen? Do you think all the checks and balances will go? Do you think the Supreme Court is so compromised they'll just nod it all through?
Yes. They want an American oligarchy is ultimately what they want. They want Russia. They want us to be Russia. They want guy in charge because they think that it's going to make their lives better. They want to be inside. They want to run stuff. They want power and money and control of women and all the things. That's what they want. Why anyone in their right mind would want this? I cannot answer that question because I think it's batshit, but that is what they want. And power is a hell of a drug. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that if this happens, that they don't do the mass deportations. The scariest thing in the entire debate last night was when one of the moderators did a great job, I thought, last night. By far the best moderators we've had, was that the mass deportation thing had an approval rating above 50%. This is madness to me. There's a guy that I work with who's a young guy, and his mother is from another, came here from another country, and he sort of, likes to waffle about how he's going to vote. And I'm like, your mom might get deported. Like, no joke. Why would you vote for the candidate that might deport your mom? I mean, you like your mom, right? You don't want her to leave. And people can't see it. And at least the Germans in the 30s can say they didn't have a template for how this stuff looks. They didn't know any better. We know better.
So after the break, we're going to talk about, so why is this race still so close? And what does the Harris campaign need to do to try and shake it up?
Mega Orderers, wanted to tell you guys about another podcast that I really like, The Jordan Harbinger Show. We're really fortunate to have Jordan as a guest later this year. He is a superstar. His show features in-depth interviews with some of the world's most fascinating minds. And what Jordan brings to the pod is a cool, calm Californian energy, talking about tech regulation, but then also relationships and some self-help advice. He also speaks with some of the most fascinating minds out there, like Jamie Metzel and Bill Browder. It's really a must-listen for any of you mega orderers out there. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The European Union is at war with illegal immigration. People once welcomed
I feel now I have a new life,
are now hunted.
Pursued by some missiles.
Migrants are dying.
Are we animals or human?
Voters are angry.
Noi siamo persone!
But migration hasn't stopped. So is this a war that EU politicians can win?
Are you a democratic state or are you not?
And who are the people standing in their way?
Borders are not just difficult, they are also killing people.
Fortress Europe is an in-depth, on-the-ground journey into the dark side of EU migration policy, from the shores of the Mediterranean to the streets of Dublin. With me, journalist Andrew Connolly. Available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.
I was at an election night watch party last night, as I mentioned, and it was for veterans and military families. And there was a guy there who was a member of the National Guard. And I asked him what would happen if Donald Trump ordered National Guard out on the street to implement some forcible action. Would you and your colleagues actually carry out these orders? And I was expecting him, I mean, this was a Democrat watch party. I was expecting him to say, no, of course not. And he said, well, it's not an easy question to answer because we swear an oath of loyalty to the Constitution and to the governor of the state in which we are assigned. So I found that really worrying because America was founded on this idea of opposing tyranny and opposing the idea of a king. And the whole point behind the Second Amendment was so that ordinary folk could rise up and form a militia to resist tyranny if the British ever came back. That was why the Second Amendment to allow Americans to have guns is in theory still there. But I found this very chilling, that they could not only come into power and implement this agenda, but actually there would be forces willing to enable it. So if this is what's at stake and the red lights are flashing so strongly, why is the race still tied?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think, first of all, some percentage of people in the country are just happy fascists. That's an uncomfortable thing to admit, but it's true. But I think a lot of it is just the media not getting the word out and not covering this guy objectively. And the media seems to think that this is Bob Dole against whoever, Clinton in 1996, and it just isn't. This is not that. This is a guy who is, first of all, manifestly unfit for office in his current form, who killed 600,000 Americans needlessly last time he was there, and then tried to overthrow the government on the way out. The 14th Amendment says in Section 3 that somebody that does the insurrection cannot hold office. And the Supreme Court says, oh, no. This Congress has to say that. But it says right in the frickin' thing that Congress has to do the opposite. Congress has to reinstate someone who does insurrection. But the court just is like, nah, we're not going to read it that way, even though that's clearly what it said. So you have these factions, and it's like the inertia of the media and the people in charge, the people that dictate what's going to get covered, that what stories are going to run on the front page. The publishers, the head editors, people like that seem to be so worried about being accused of being biased, or they're just all in. I don't know what the deal is, or they suck at their jobs. It's, some combination of the three. Jake Tapper, in the first debate, when Biden was there, allowed Trump to lie about the suckers and losers comment. General Kelly told him, Tapper, specifically, that quote was true. And he just sat there like a fucking puppet. And it's like, and you report to work the next day? I'm going to listen to anything you say for the rest of your life? What a disgrace. I mean, that's not a journalist. And I think what these publications need to figure out, and fast, is that in a dictatorship, the first thing that goes is the press. So I think if you're a journalist and you're in a journalistic institution, it's okay to say this is bad for democracy. If it is, it's an objective fact. It's not even an opinion. They want to overthrow democracy. They want to overthrow the will of the people. And the reason we know that Trump wants to overthrow the rule of the people is because he tried to do it when he left last time. Oh my God.
But is it also the case that people are so polarized? We're not all watching NBC and CBS and CNN for our news. We're not all reading the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune. I mean, people are in their rabbit holes on social media. So
right.
Not only are the sort of the mainstream press that Trump demonizes is actually sort of glossing over what's at stake in the election. And then a lot of people are in their own sort of bunkers of extreme sources of misinformation and conspiracy theories.
I mean, that's a good point, because Fox News is insidious. I mean, I know there are people in my family who are going to vote for Trump, who are good people, very decent people who are ethically completely the opposite of what Trump is and stands for. But they're going to vote for him because they either think, that his personality doesn't really matter, it's his policies and it doesn't matter, and da-da-da. One member of my family has a son who is gay and married. And, if Trump is elected, that's going away. And he says, oh, that'll never happen. It'll never happen. That's what they said in Germany.
I've been doing some door-to-door canvassing. And what I'm picking up on the doorstep is kind of very worrying. I'm in Virginia, and I'm in a suburb of Virginia that is tended increasingly to vote Democrat. On my canvassing, I'm getting a pretty nuanced picture. It's like 25% solidly Democrat, 25% who don't want to say, and 25% who are like, I'm just not sure. And it's like, there is Donald Trump, an existential threat. I'm just not sure about her economic policies. And I think there's something more going on there. And one of the other things I'm picking up is the women who I've talked to say, yeah, I'm in the Kamala Harris camp. My husband's not sure. I've had arguments with friends about this, but I just can't help feeling there's sexism. And I don't like to play that card.
There is.
I don't like to play that card. And Kamala Harris is not running on, hey, I'm the first female who might be president.
Not at all.
She's not doing what Hillary Clinton was doing at all. She's not playing the race card, the woman card. But, why this judgment? Kamala Harris is not some wacko left progressive extremist, although people are trying to paint her that way. She's done everything to sound like a John McCain on national security, even annoying quite a lot of people on the left. She's, her plans are no more vague than other previous candidates, and Donald Trump's policies are completely incoherent, and yet people are going, I'm just not sure. I need to see more about her policies. I just feel that's just, I hate to say it, but I think there must be an element of sexism in there, maybe unconscious. But there seems to be this sort of judging, I'm just not sure, and I need to see more about her policies. I don't buy it.
No, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. They don't like the way she laughs. There's always something about her and her energy or something like that. And all that is sexism. And I think it's because, we haven't had a woman president in the country yet. You look around the world, it's embarrassing, frankly. That's part of it. The racism, I think, is also part of it, although I think that the misogyny is the bedrock on which the skyscraper is built, right? You can't get deeper than that in the stereotypical biases and prejudices and stuff like that. But, she has all that stuff. And then she's from California. A lot of people in the middle of the country don't like California. San Francisco. And, is she being fake when she's laughing and dancing and all that? And the answer is no. She's actually a funny person. She's probably really a fun hang, honestly, in a way that Donald Trump absolutely is not.
No, it comes across. I mean, she comes across as pretty authentic. She's not like Hillary Clinton, where it felt sort of a little brittle.
Right.
She was such a policy wonk, and her sort of human qualities, which I'm sure she has. I think she's been very unfairly characterized, but she came across as more sort of brittle. Kamala Harris comes across as genuinely warm. I mean, her stepchildren love her. The ex-wife of her husband loves her.
That was key. That was like, oh my God. Trump's own wife doesn't like him. I mean,
Yeah.
But here's the thing. First of all, I think that the Dobbs decision at the end of the day is more important than anything else. I think that's driving a lot of people's votes. I think a lot of people in this election are going to vote on that.
The decision to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Yes. Anytime that's been on the ballot in any way, anytime abortion stuff, even in really red states like Kansas, people want the right to choose. They want women to have control over their own health care. They don't want like Donald Trump in there or J.D. Vance in there making their decisions for them, their medical decisions, okay? I think a lot of young people see that. I think it's the media in general. The Jake Tappers of the world are bored of talking about it, but it doesn't go away. It's a real issue that affects a lot of people and will affect even more people if Trump wins. I think that's animating a lot of the vote. Trump lost by 8 million votes last time? He's not gaining votes. I think he's going to lose by 10 million votes this time. I think she's going to gain votes. I think he's going to either stay the same or atrophy a little bit because God knows he's good at killing off his own people, right, with his terrible policies. And I think people are increasingly more turned off by him. The guy is a convicted felon, which never even came up in the debate last night. And the Jack Smith thing is going to drop between now and Election Day. This whole long, 180-page, whatever it is, that's accompanying the documents case that apparently is so bad and so damning that Trump is doing everything in his power to make it not come out.
This is the report on election interference.
It's a Jack Smith document that's going to basically reveal a lot of what he knows that isn't public yet. So it's going to make Trump look really, really bad, even worse than he already has. Whether that makes a difference, I don't know. Is there going to be more October surprise kind of stuff? I feel like Netanyahu certainly wants Trump to win, and we've seen that. I think that's pretty clear. Putin clearly wants Trump to win. So lots of things could happen, but I just think she's going to win the popular vote by a lot. I think she's going to win enough swing states to get her over the hump. I think she's going to win states where people that are even like toss up or lean red. I think she's going to be in the actual election. I think she's going to do well. I think the polls are wrong because they've been wrong consistently. I think there's a lot of women who are married to these Trumpy guys who are sort of going through the motions, but they will not vote for Trump. They'll tell their husbands that they vote for Trump, but they won't do it. I think we're going to see that down the line. And we haven't had an election in this country that's over at 9 o'clock Eastern time in quite some time. And what I'm hoping, and I'm going to speak this into existence, is that this is going to be one of those times where we're going to be sitting on the East Coast looking at the map, and as soon as California, Oregon, Washington come in, that's going to put her over the hump, and we can all celebrate.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that. Based on my canvassing, which is very unscientific and a very unscientific small sampling, I'm a little bit less confident. And I'm talking of October surprises. Is what's happening in the Middle East the October surprise? You hinted at, you said Netanyahu obviously wants Trump to win. And there is this view that chaos in the Middle East plays into the narrative that this administration has been weak on national security and the world has sort of blown up on fire under Biden's watch or under Kamala Harris's watch. I mean, things blowing up in the Middle East. You've got a lot of very unhappy people about what's going on in Gaza. And I've talked to people on the doorsteps who've said, I'm not voting for the Harris ticket because I'm so angry about what's happening in Gaza. I'm sympathetic to the Palestinians. But now you have Israel under attack from Iran, and the administration is going to feel bound to support Israel because that's what America does, and Israel is being attacked by Iran. So Netanyahu can escalate this conflict even more, and that plays into the narrative of chaos. And then Ukraine, meanwhile, is not getting a look in at all. So Putin may decide to press home his advantage in Ukraine at the moment while the world is looking at the Middle East. What Tim Walz was saying is at this moment of crisis, this is when you need steady leadership. You cannot have the fickle leadership of Trump. And what J.D. Vance was saying is, yeah, but none of this happened on Trump's watch. When Trump was president, there was no new conflict. So where are American voters going to feel on that?
I don't want to downplay the Gaza stuff because it's awful. And I think Biden, after initially handling it really well, has stopped handling it well. Yeah, he's lost the plot a little bit. I think Kamala has tried to set up kind of her own take on it without pushing back against Biden too much. But at the end of the day, if you go and look at the polls, that issue isn't very high among most voters. It just isn't.
But I've had those conversations on the doorstep. My two longest conversations on the doorstep were with two people who said they could not support this administration because of their handling of Israel-Gaza. And, I made the point to them, but do you think it's going to get better under Trump? And they were like, no. But they're like, I'm just not going to give my vote for an administration that is still sending so many weapons to Israel.
Kamala, and this is the thing that really bugs me, and Vance knows this, and it was very clever rhetoric on his part. The vice president of the United States has zero power to do fuck. It's just a powerless thing. The VP can go to the Senate and break ties and can become the president when the president can't be president anymore. That's it. There's nothing else that the VP can do. As I think it was Garner Vance said, it's not worth a bucket of warm piss, is what he said, this guy who was one of FDR's. And everybody who has been vice president has complained about this. Vice presidents don't have that much power, and they certainly don't drive the policy. They can try to be influential, but at the end of the day, Biden's going to do what Biden's going to do. So I think that the thing to tell these people is we don't know what Kamala is going to do either. Kamala is going to do something different than what Biden is doing. She's not going to go out there and run on that because it's going to make too many people mad. That's how politics works. You have to have faith in the fact that she's going to go in there and do a better job than what Biden's doing, whereas we know what Trump is going to do. He's going to side with Netanyahu every time. He's going to let them do whatever they want. Anybody that thinks that way is going to vote third party no matter what. If it wasn't Gaza, it would be something else. And if somebody's that passionate about it, they're just lost anyway. And it's best to try to move on to somebody else in the way that McDonald's doesn't try to market their products to vegans and people that are health conscious. They just try to hit everybody else. So I don't know. I just think it's a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale, based not in reality. It's just not based in reality in any way.
Again, that's what worries me is the election doesn't feel based in reality.
Yes, that is true.
It's what's logic and glaring in front of us versus sort of gut feel. And so you are saying that your gut instinct is actually when push comes to shove, it will break Harris's way. And I was listening to another podcast last night. Shock. I shouldn't listen to anybody else, but I was listening to another podcast where they said often these things sort of break at the last minute. My last question to you is what else should or could Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the Democrat campaign be doing in these last 5 weeks to make that happen?
I've only get like 7 or 8 texts a day asking for money, so they should up that. They should be 25 texts. No, I think they just have to do what they're doing. I think they've been running. I mean, this has been a very, very good campaign from where I sit. Mm-hmm. Like the two main things that she had to do in terms of decision making: who's the VP? That was an A+. Walz is amazing, and running the DNC as an event, which again, off the charts, best one.
It was great. It was great.
So based on those two things alone and her decision making, I don't know what else there is. And if you watch all that stuff, everybody likes her, as you mentioned. Even the wife of her the ex-wife of her husband loves her. And I think that's kind of the general gist of things. And I'm hoping that as we get closer to the election and as more people have to make up their minds one way or the other, they're going to look at her and, be like, I like her. And conversely, I think people are sick of Trump. I mean, come on. How do you want 4 more years of this guy? I think people were sick of him last time, and that's why he lost. And I think people remain sick of him. He's lost every election, by the way. All of his candidates lose. Every time he's on the ballot, he's lost. So I'm going to speak it into existence that we're going to be okay.
All right. And on that happy note, thank you so much. This has been absolutely great. It's really fun talking to you. And I thoroughly commend to listeners to watch your amazing YouTube channel and your podcast as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great time. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mega Orderers out there, for listening to today's episode. And if you enjoyed this and can bear to take any more US politics or other excellent episodes with my host, Jason Pack, and other co-hosts, Arthur Snell and Jane Kinnamont, please tap follow wherever you get your podcasts and you'll be automatically notified when every new episode launches. You can also read more about this episode and other expert contributions in our Substack written by our golden host, Jason Pack. The link is in the show notes. All that remains is for me to say thank you to our producer, George McDonough, and our executive producer, Neil Fern. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a calm week.